Hello there, my friends, and welcome back to another episode of TA with MK. My name is MK. It's been a while since I made a video, probably, 5-6 weeks, maybe longer. I know it's been a bit, but, those of you that have followed my channel for a while know that I've just been kind of busy with, we're expecting our first child, a little baby boy, which is due towards the end of March. So we've just been kind of getting things ready for that. Also just taking a little break from crypto. It's really been that kind of the right time to take a break. So hopefully a lot of you have as well. The holidays, of course, New Year's, some of that going on. Happy New Year's, by the way. Happy late Christmas for those of you that celebrate it. But really with the bear market going on right now and things being a little bit boring, I would say this was the perfect opportunity to take a break, let the batteries recharge, and kind of get ready for the future. And I think that the future is obviously bright, and that's what we're going to talk about in this video. Just a little bit of an update kind of on the market, a little DXY update, the strength of the US dollar, a little bit of the Bitcoin chart, and just kind of some my personal plan kind of coming forward for the next few weeks to month or two as we look to kind of transition back into crypto, as I think things are going to possibly be getting a little bit more interesting in the near future. And so, if that all sounds interesting to you guys, please remember, as always, to like and subscribe. Let's talk about it. It's TA with MK. It's TA with MK. Alrighty, so here we are on the DXY. Now I want to start out on the weekly chart. It's important to understand that as it correlates to stocks and things, that really the higher time frames are what matter on the DXY. Things like the weekly, we're going to zoom in here in a minute and look at the daily. But ultimately, they have an inverse correlation with each other. Generally speaking, when the DXY is going up, that is bad for, stocks in general, especially risk on assets. And when it's going down, that's good. Now, that being said, it doesn't really correlate so much on the lower time frames. You can't really watch a 5-minute or a 1-hour chart on the DXY and expect that to, correlate over to something like Bitcoin. However, these bigger time frame moves most definitely have a correlation, or at least they have had over the last several years and generally over the course of the DXY's history. So that being said, we are on the weekly chart. Now, this is something we began talking about, I want to say, 8-9 months ago. There was this big double bottom that DXY had put in. This being the first bottom, clear back in 2018. It had a little double bottom inside of this larger double bottom, right? Which was most recently in 2021 in May, and it broke out above the double bottom neckline, which is this green box on my chart, sometime back in June of, this past year. And it even retested it. And so we put, at that time, we spoke about the measured move, which has been on this chart, or at least on my chart, for quite some time. It's this yellow box up here. And while it didn't quite reach it, it was within a couple of dollars of the lower end of this, which was the 115.5 to 116 target. I want to say it topped out at like 114. So, very close. At that point, we saw a rejection. Now, there's a couple ways of looking at what price action, or what the DXY, could do over the course of the next, few months to really 2023 at this point. And, option one, until proven otherwise, you have to look at this giant weekly trend as being one large W pattern, right? A lot of people just call these a W or a double bottom. And ultimately, this was a breakout and potentially right now a retest. So if this turns out to be a retest of this green zone, well, at that point, you would expect on the weekly at least some more upside, right? A retest and, to trend to this direction, which again, on these higher time frames, has an inverse correlation with stocks, things like Bitcoin, of course, and therefore that would be, a bad thing ultimately for stocks. That being said, there's the hopium, I guess, that this could actually break down and validate the double bottom retest. We see something like this where it comes up, flips that previous resistance, and support back as resistance, and then maybe we see a big rally out of stocks as this trends down and maybe retests some of this stronger support that's back in this area where it's been support on, multiple occasions. Now, as I always say on my channel, I'm not really here to predict. We just more or less come up with some analysis, and then we just kind of play the odds, I guess you could say, whatever statistically is more likely, which in this case, a bounce is more likely. But at the same time, we don't have any, confirmed bias, because at the end of the day, we're just going to react to what the stock does. We're going to have a plan A, plan B, which very much in this case, plan A would be this upside move. Plan B, of course, would be be a breakdown of the downside move. That being said, these weekly charts, they're going to take time to play out. You could see a short-term bounce. Let me clear this all back up just so we can not have a giant mess here on the chart. Now, you could see something like a short-term bounce and then ultimately it does fail, or you could see something like a short-term failure, back down here to as low as even like 102, because you do have some previous resistance there, and where these candles closed here, and ultimately that could still be a test of the double bottom, and then you see some upside. So this is going to be something that's going to take some time to play out. My own personal strategy right now is to still stay out of the market, at least other than maybe potentially some very short-term scalp trades or something like that. As far as any long-term investing, I think this would almost be, one of the worst times to do it as far as the DXY is concerned, because this could ultimately be just one big, retest, and then it trends back up this direction, and stocks have a, a terrible year. So now we've hopped over to the daily chart here on the DXY. So if you were interested in possibly making some trades or looking for some short to mid-term holds, whether that's long or short tokens, we could zoom into the daily on the DXY, which is still a high enough time frame to get some ideas or clues as to which direction the DXY may go, over the next month or so. And this would be where this would be govern my bias, at least, towards what I think it would be the better way to trade, crypto, for example. We trade it to the upside, or do we look for more short opportunities? And one of the first things we'd want to look at, and this is something I haven't even looked at as I prepared for this video, which was, I didn't prepare for this video. I just kind of am looking at this for the first time in the last few weeks. Like I said, I took a big break, but we're going to look at what the indicators down here show to kind of get an idea of what direction we do believe the DXY could go. So the first thing we see on the daily is that most recently it did top out a little bit here on the stochastic RSI. Down here you see that it used this level on the regular RSI at around 30 as support. It looks like it's trying to currently retest this green box that has been. Each of the major rallies out of the DXY have all began with bounces at that same area. I had a previous video where I spoke about that, so this could end up being the start of a big rally that way if this holds up as support. Of course, in the short term it could lose it again and come back down here to the 30 level one more time. Again, plan A, plan B. And as we look up here on the MACD, nothing really giving us a bias one way or the other. Clearly it's been kind of sideways this whole time, between about 103 to about 105. But if you were to just kind of, I guess, put the cards all out on the table and start sliding, some one direction, some the other direction, to kind of say, hey, which direction does this look more likely to go? It looks more likely like it's going to bounce. You put this with the weekly and you can see, hey, this major area that has, shown on the RSI to bounce in the past. I put the most weight on the RSI. Second, that's probably the one I put the most weight on. So we'll call that my first most important indicator that I pay attention to. The stochastic is the second one that I probably pay the most attention to. However, this could just end up being kind of like a short-term retest of this red box that I have here that's been at resistance a lot in the past whenever the DXY has had downside moves, but it's also been support, or whenever it's bounced above it, it's been kind of the same time it's had its upside moves. So looking at this, I would have to say that again, we'll just kind of wait and see what the next few days to the rest of this week, or this coming week, does. But generally, if you were to ask me, hold a gun against my head and say, hey, McKay, what direction do you think the DXY goes over the next few weeks? I would say it probably has at least a short-term bounce. I'm not calling for any major bounce yet. I'm not saying that this is when it goes back up here. In fact, it's more likely to do something like this, where it has a little rally back up to, say, 106, followed by at least another retest of where it's at now, in which case you'd see a short-term pullback out of stocks, probably a little rally again, and then at that point, we'll see what it does. It'll be decision time. Next up, we're going to hop over here to the daily chart on the SPX, which is the S&P 500. Another chart I haven't looked at here in a while. I don't even know what this was. Some analysis I was probably given on a video. We'll just go ahead and delete that. But the biggest thing here, just looking at the SPX, is we still have this major trend line that's been resistance on 1, 2, 3, and most recently 4 occasions. Also the 200, if we zoom in here, you can kind of see that the 200 EMA, which is the blue one, and the 200 SMA, which is the 200 simple, were resistance back here in August of 2022 last year, and then most recently here again in early December on a couple occasions. It just hasn't been able to flip that as support. For any short-term and upside that could turn into longer-term upside, we really need to see the S&P 500 break out of this on the daily, flip not only this trend line or this blue area that I have on my on my chart as support, but also these daily moving averages. It has not had the moving averages as support since April of last year. You can see it lost it here, bearishly retested it, then ultimately down, trended downwards, bearishly retested a second time, put in a lower low, and then this could be considered a third bearish retest. And ultimately the question is, are we going to be able to push out and flip it as support? Or are we looking for something over the course of maybe the first quarter of 2023 for stocks to roll over and potentially put in even another lower low? Or does it finally put in some sort of a double bottom down here? And then we finally do break out later in 2023. These are the things we'll be kind of looking for, but in the short term, if we need to see a breakout of this trend line, what we don't want to see, unless we're looking to short the market, of course, would be this support level right now at around 3,700, we'll call it. If we lose that and turn it to resistance, then at that point we'd at least expect to move back down here to this support level, somewhere just above 3,400. And then just to kind of wrap up today's video, again, I'll be putting out more videos finally here over the coming weeks, just to kind of give you guys some more training videos, some more market analysis, some more updates. In this one, I'm just kind of giving more of just a general feel as I kind of look at the charts the first time in a few weeks, just kind of what I'm seeing. Now, again, I always trade based on the order of kind of what I think's the higher priority. In this case, that was the DXY first on the higher time frames. The S&P 500 most definitely has a high correlation with Bitcoin. So I'm looking at Bitcoin here, but ultimately the DXY and the S&P 500, in my eyes at least, will govern what Bitcoin is able to do over the next few weeks, in the first month or a month and a half or so here of 2023. That being said, you can see this area up above that was support, 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 support. It's this big green box that was support for the longest time, dating back to June of last year, until it ultimately lost it here, in November of the end of last year, flipped it as resistance, and we've just been in this new range of about 17,000, we'll just call it 18,000. So basically 18,000 on the upper end or just under, and the lower end, which is the range low, at just around 15, we'll call it 15,000, say 600 to 800, somewhere in that range. So really, to see any extended or sustained upside, we need to flip 18K. You can see we're having a little rally today. The question is it just a fool's rally where ultimately, we put in another lower high than this, somewhere up here around 17.5, resistance, and then we just head back down to the bottom of the range. I really think the S&P 500 is going to govern that. If the S&P 500 is not able to break out like we talked about on that previous chart here, if it's not able to, I would just look at this as a short-term rally out of Bitcoin. Probably a good opportunity to honestly look for shorts, especially if the DXY has confluence. If we zoom into lower time frames and we see that this starts to build some sort of divergence and maybe starts to bounce here at this zone that we talked about, then you would likely expect the S&P 500 to do something similar, where maybe it gets rejected here again, starts to roll over, and then at Bitcoin at that point, we'll do some analysis in the coming days, but at that point you would expect some sort of another lower high, and ultimately Bitcoin to probably come back down here to the mid 16s, probably as low as say 16,300. So that's what we'll be looking for. And one final thing I wanted to quickly mention, and I'll actually discuss this in more length in tomorrow's video, but this is the Litecoin chart here on Binance. This is the daily chart. One thing that I have noticed really over the last half of last year, and towards the end even, Litecoin seems to kind of be a leading indicator for the market of which direction it's going to go. You can see that as Bitcoin's having kind of some sustained upside, or whenever it's had downside, Litecoin a lot of times has been the mover, the first mover. It's moved before Bitcoin even, which is kind of giving you an indication that crypto is about to rally. Litecoin first, Bitcoin. I do think Litecoin going into this next year will also probably still remain, still continue to do that. And I also think Ethereum, which has some big news coming up later this year, is going to be another key leading indicator for crypto. I say that to say that if you kind of look at where it's at now, if we do an Alt H here on the keyboard, let me change that to a different color since it's not really a daily. let's do orange. It's not a weekly, sorry. Blues are my weekly resistance. This is more of a daily resistance in my eyes. But anyway, you can see here that this was resistance here, and then most recently on several occasions. And as of right, at the time of making this video, Litecoin is pushing above that area. So the question is, can it flip it as support and continue to push higher? In which case, you'll most likely see Bitcoin rally up maybe to 17,600 or 800, and you may see Litecoin make a rally up here to like the $96 range. So I'm going to talk about this more in tomorrow's video. I just want to kind of put it on your radar. Just something I've been kind of noticing the few times I have looked at the charts in the past month or two, that Litecoin has kind of been a leading indicator for the crypto market specifically. And that looks like a good spot to wrap it up for today. As always, I appreciate you guys stopping in. If on the way out, if you feel like you want to leave any comments about anything we can do in 2023 content-wise, something you might be looking forward to or would like to get my opinion or my analysis on, let me know again in the comment section. And as always, on your way out, please remember to like and subscribe. We'll catch you in the next one. It's